Gather around, my students. You might want to pull your chairs a bit closer today. Prepare yourselves to descend. Because today's explainer, well, it isn't your standard academic overview. No, we're diving into a dark, cautionary folktale, a literal descent into that damp, lightless space just beneath the conscious floorboards of the mind. We're going to explore the psychological terror of a self that, quite frankly, consumes itself. Down here in the shadows, an entity known as von Nichts arises. And it's not merely some passive shadow. It is the primary agent of all striving. So lower your lamps, steady your nerves, and let's step together into the inverted theater of the soul. The quality of flatness. I want you to really feel the cold dread that those words imply. This subterranean id, this tarantula we're studying, it rebrands its primal subterranean venom as the supreme moral law of the hollow. It whispers to its victims, submit to the web. Absolute flatness is the only way to be truly safe. You see, it doesn't just want peace. It actively demands the total leveling of all distinction. Unconscious drives aren't repressed down here. Instead, they become the architects of this airless, sterile control. The tarantula weaves a gray silk universe, demanding that everything, absolutely everything, remain forever motionless.
Now, philosophically speaking, we define this tarantula as the Fichtean I. Just think of it as an ego defined entirely by its own relentless, controlling activity. But instead of striving upward to jagged peaks like you might expect, it looks upon its own industry and builds a museum of the soul, a place perfectly preserved, flat, and sterile as a tomb. It weaponizes virtue as a moral shield. It spins this web of gray silk, not to catch physical prey. No, it spins it to bind any opposing concept in chains of suffocating safety. To this preacher of nothingness, any individual greatness, any movement toward the heights whatsoever, is a pathological threat to its sacred, silent peace.
But here's the thing. You cannot build a tomb so tight that it silences the universe entirely. Listen closely. Can you feel the walls trembling? A strange, booming, persistent ache begins to violently rattle the walls of this gray shulk tribunal. The tarantula clutches its web exactly like a high judge clutching a gavel, completely mistaking its sterile desire for safety for some higher moral purpose. But it cannot stop the intrusive friction tearing at the floorboards. The universe demands movement. A new presence is manifesting, violently resisting the tarantula's suffocating will.
Meet Das Wunder, the Not-I. Now, to the tarantula, he is simply the intrusive monster in the walls. But in reality, he is the persistent, undeniable ache reminding the eye of its own unrealized potential. He is the obsidian serpent of Nietzsche's eternal return, booming from the darkness. Break the cycle, or your nothingness will loop endlessly. You see, the wanderer provides the absolutely necessary friction for growth. He's the fire of transformation that the tarantula so desperately seeks to repress beneath its psychological bandages of gray silk.
So, an agonizing philosophical combat unfolds in our dark fable. The tarantula hisses with clinical, anxious detachment, remains silent, stays safely bound in my gray silk. But the wanderer strikes back with an inescapable, echoing demand. Rise, embrace the unyielding, jagged ache of becoming. It is the ultimate tension between artificial order and chaotic, terrifying growth. The wanderer's relentless pursuit serves as a jagged obstacle to the tarantula's desperate desire to keep the world asleep. And this tension, it inevitably rots into tragedy. We call this the curdled dialectic. My students, pay close attention here because this is the exact moment where the mind begins to decay. A healthy dialectic actually requires synthesis, a merging of opposing forces. But here, the I refuses. The tarantula outright refuses to synthesize the not-I. Instead, it substitutes authentic self-actualization for a parasitic, toxic relationship with its own boundary, attempting to smother the fire entirely. Let's clinically detail the steps of this path of repression. Step 1. Refuse to name the wanderer. Because if you don't acknowledge the friction of growth, you can protect your illusion of value. Step 2. Furnish the darkness with even more gray silk to silence the intruder. Step 3. Repackage your terror of the mountain path as a noble doctrine of collective security and mercy. And finally, Step 4. Retreat deeper into the museum of the soul, perfectly preserved from the sunlight. But make no mistake, this repression is a pressure cooker. It guarantees that when the walls inevitably break, they will scream with a primal resentment that simply cannot be contained. Now, I want you to imagine stepping behind a grand, decaying marble column.
We're going to watch this experiment unfold with the detached surgical irony of the jester. We smile as the surgeon who has removed the wrong organ with flawless, perfect technique. From the shadows, the jester steps forward to facilitate the final confrontation. He presents the tarantula with the frameless void mirror. He forces the eye to look dead into its own not eye. So, what terrifying truth lies reflected within this glass? The mirror refuses the dignity of a boarder. It completely strips away that moral shield. In the reflection, the tarantula sees that its pure activity was never justice. Actually, it was a purposeless, burning desire to punish the very growth it claimed to protect. The gray silk was merely a decorative language for raw, unfiltered envy. It finally realizes that existence without the friction of the wanderer is nothing but a hollow performance. And as this agonizing realization hits, the eye and the not eye lock into a catastrophic, inescapable merger. This triggers an absolute inferno of nihilism, incinerating the entire architecture of the psyche. As you can see, the entire architecture of the psyche, that great self-actualizing machine, is 100% consumed by the inferno of nihilism. All the symbols of the tarantula's flat, sterile order just dissolve into ash. It is the terrifying, total dissolution of the self. The theater burns to the ground, taking the museum of the soul right along with it.
And what exactly is left when the fires burn down to glowing embers? Well, from the smoldering, choking ruins of the inverted tribunal arises something far, far worse than the tarantula. The dialectic has reached its final, horrific conclusion. The fire provided by the wanderer was used, yes, but not for elevation. It was used for destruction. And from those ashes, a new horror breathes its first rattling breath.
We are introduced to the Red Judge. He is a skeletal entity, a towering monument to destruction. This is the curdled, grotesque result of an eye that completely refused to fill the cavity of its own void with creative self-transformation. The Red Judge trades the quiet, suffocating gray silk of the web for a blistering, branding iron of pure retribution. He exists to mark the world with permanent, silent scars. He is the inevitable, terrifying outcome for a psyche that chooses the safety of the dust over the brutal, beautiful struggle of the mountain path. The real tragedy of our fable lies in the choice made in those flames. We see the path of the failed psyche, the Red Judge. True justice has been entirely discarded. He's nothing but a machine of revenge now, hissing into the ash. If I cannot rest, nothing shall. He exists solely for the visceral sensation of his own terrible descent. But there is another path, that of the true seeker. The true seeker hears the wanderer roaring through the smoke. Use the fire, fly. They know that the wanderer's fire, the friction of the not eye, is an absolute requirement for elevation. You have to use that chaotic fire to fly beyond the suffocating dust, rather than using it to burn your own theater to the ground.
My students, we have reached the end of our Dark Explainer today, and I want to leave you with this haunting realization directly from our source. The not eye, that terrifying, jagged friction that rattles your walls and demands your growth, it is not a monster. It is the very life force you require to escape the spider's web of your own complacency. You absolutely must embrace the violent friction of your own growth. You must climb those jagged peaks, or you will inevitably be consumed by the crushing, flat void of your own making. So I leave you with this. What will you do when you hear the wanderer in your walls?